Brian Miller is a fine art photographer from Baltimore, where he teaches some lucky kids photography at a Jesuit high school. He received his BFA from the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University and his Master of Arts in Social Anthropology from the University of Manchester in England. His images are most often pensive moments which he seeks out with his medium format camera. His insight into his own creative motivation was inspiring to me as we sat down in the kitchen nook.
There's got to be something specific that makes an artist do something creative. But there are a lot of other creative things too that we've asked, say scientists ask questions about how does life start and those things. And there are specific vague answers, very specific answers that still don't come close to really explaining those things. In photography, one of the expressions, although precise but also debated, is the decisive moment, which was a Henri Cartier-Bresson phrase that he came up with. It's just this eruption right before he releases the shutter. It's hard to say where that comes from. It is both. It's not either or. It's not a dichotomy between. It's not an outside inspiration and it's not an internal inspiration. It's that moment where there is not a difference between the inside and the outside. It's electricity, just drags them, pulls them together tight, and you're like, oh, that's the time right now, That's how it is for me.
How about the word transcendent?
That's funny, because it's one of the first projects I do when I teach. I do a project where the kids have to address transcendence in some way. Now, oftentimes they interpret that as extraordinary or surrealistic or something, and that's fine because those kinds of imagery can do that. But I think real transcendence is very difficult. I wouldn't say that every time I make a picture that there's transcendence, and it may come a couple years after I printed the image and I look at something and there's a great leap forward in understanding about something, because transcendence is about moving beyond your knowledge of the self or your knowledge of something, and that you really step beyond. I think that's a very difficult thing to actually experience.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be held back.
It's very difficult to move beyond the self. It's funny, in my department, I teach at a high school in Baltimore, Jesuit school in Baltimore, where I went to high school, actually. And the one fella is very connected to the material sense of art, of visual art, as a high art. And he's in disagreement with the guy who founded the department, who's very into art as a way of doing things, sort of related to, say, St. Thomas Aquinas, who was very much art is a practice that you do. And so I'm always in between, because I definitely feel that art is a way of doing things. So you can be artful in anything, and you can really be an artist at anything. One of the first photographers in college that I came in contact with that I read about was Alfred Stieglitz, who is critical to not only photography, as it was in the 20th century, but also 20th century art. I mean, he was responsible for bringing people like Picabia and Braque and Picasso and Brancusi and Giacometti, all these people to the United States, and showing their work for the first time. But there was things about his philosophy in photography that, again, resonated with me, that I connected to. And it came out of his series called Equivalents, which were basically photographs of the sky, clouds and cloud formations and atmosphere. And all the ones I've ever seen have been like photogravures, and they're just beautiful. They're just absolutely beautiful. His idea that there were visual equivalents as a communicative tool to give back to other people or to show other people that somehow represented a state of being or state of mind. When I was a freshman in college, for some reason, it was just ways I was connecting to the world that had special meaning for me. Where my photographs come from is this very sort of mental construct. Even though they're very visual experience, it has to do with, yes, emotion, but also just sort of thoughts, how your thoughts are put together, and what are you representing when you construct or compose a photograph or choose your subject matter. I'm pretty particular, and there's a lot of reasons why I don't believe in shooting like crazy to get the right picture. I was always told that in college and I never understood. Obviously you have to shoot and build up to learn and progress and educate yourself on what you are looking at, what you're seeing, and the representations that you're making. I've just never been able to like snap, 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 snap. Which is why I moved to a medium format camera when I was a little over 10 years ago, or actually just about 10 years ago, that has a viewfinder on it. So I have to look down and really compose and pay attention and work slower. Kind of like you would with a large format camera where you have to look through the ground glass, which I love working with large format, but it's a little bit inconvenient.
Yeah.
If I had to associate my photography to something else, I'd have to say it's meditation. And I might stare through my viewfinder for a minute or two before I actually feel it's the right time to make an image. And I'm just watching things happen. So that's another actually inspiration for me, another impetus for doing work, is because it may, you know, at an early stage it was more incidental. This, oh, I have a camera, I took classes, I really like it, I'm doing it now. It's developed into something else. And I'm sure it took me a long time to kind of put those together in my own life, that what I was doing somehow connected to a spiritual sense of the world. And I don't think everybody gets there. I don't think everybody uses their art to get to that point. But I've kind of found it that way. And so I'd have to relate a lot of my photography to reading, you know, things I've read, from as wide a spectrum as, say, Alan Watts to John Steinbeck, and the type of images that, say, Steinbeck's created when you're reading a book are so vivid to me, and so real. And that kind of imagery that he's created has impacted me. Watts, for instance, again, he's a writer who's very concerned with Zen issues and contemplative issues. And I read all that stuff at a very early age. Or I kept finding a connection between experiences I had, especially out photographing, with things I was reading about in terms of like what is an extraordinary experience of being hypersensitive to something and being aware, becoming fully aware of yourself and the environment at the same time. And all these things kept leading me back to the way I was out photographing. So those things have been really important for me. I don't need to make photographic images. Well, I don't need to make them all the time. I have friends that work commercially and they're constantly making images, constantly. Mm-hmm. And they leave little time for reflection in there. And I just don't come from that type of background. I want to shoot and work and process, and I may sit on my negatives for a year before I really look at them and think about either what I was experiencing at the time, what they mean to me, how they fit together as a group. It's not religious, and it's not a definition that means that there is necessarily something out there beyond my knowledge or my understanding or capacity for understanding. Mm-hmm. And it's not a thing. Okay. I guess I've always felt that spirituality is a type of awareness of the connective tissue that connects things, scientifically or metaphorically, you know, like literally like matter that we're talking about, or the things that are unseen that may connect those things, either through history, meaning maybe we all come from the same amoeba, you know, and that history connects us, you know, or the things that connect a community, which is history and interaction and those things. But being out and walking around, and you find these moments of awareness